Imagine a world where power was absolute, where kings ruled by divine right, and where your life's trajectory was sealed the moment you were born. A serf remained a serf, a lord remained a lord. The law served the hierarchy, not the people. This was medieval Europe, a continent wrapped in feudal chains, its social order as rigid as the stone castles that dotted the landscape. And yet, by the late Middle Ages, something remarkable began to stir. Not in palaces or battlefields, but in the streets of cities like Florence, Nuremberg, Venice, and Lubeck. In the smoky back rooms of merchant halls, in the clamor of bustling markets, in the quiet calculations of bankers and scribes, a quiet revolution was beginning. These cities were rewriting the rules. Kings began to lose their grip, and the people, merchants, craftsmen, thinkers, began to rise. Let us walk through the gates of Lubeck, one of the great trading cities of the Hanseatic League. The year is 1350. Ships crowd the harbor, their sails heavy with wind, their holds full of timber, grain, salt, and wool. The smell of fish, tar, and spice fills the air. On the quay, a merchant named Jakob, the son of a former peasant, tallies the prices of goods brought in from Riga and Bruges. His pen, not a sword, is his weapon. And his power? It lies in contracts and coins, not titles. This scene is not unique. Across the Holy Roman Empire, cities were bargaining for charters, legal documents that gave them the right to collect taxes, hold courts, even raise their own militias. They called them free imperial cities, loyal in name to the emperor, but governed by their own councils. Frankfurt, Augsburg, Nuremberg. These weren't just cities, they were small republics. In northern Italy, the transformation was even more dramatic. Cities like Venice and Florence weren't simply breaking free from feudal lords, they were becoming states unto themselves. Venice, governed by its great council and led by the Doge, had its own fleet, its own laws, and even its own colonies. Florence was ruled by guilds and merchant elites who formed a government known as the Signoria, an early experiment in representative politics. And then, disaster struck. In 1347, the Black Death arrived. Within 5 years, Europe lost nearly half of its population. Entire villages disappeared. Fields overgrew with weeds. Families buried their dead and fled their homes. The world stood still. But when the plague receded, something had changed forever. There was suddenly more land than people, more houses than tenants. Wages skyrocketed. Feudal lords, once flush with rents and labor, found their fortunes collapsing. Some were forced to sell off land. Others mortgaged their castles. The feudal hierarchy had cracked. In the cities, meanwhile, survivors began to seize the moment. Elena, the daughter of a tanner in Siena, watched her brothers perish in the plague. Left with the family workshop, she took over the trade, hired young apprentices, and began exporting leather to Pisa and Genoa. Before long, her household was wealthier than any local noble. Hers is one of thousands of stories of people who stepped into the economic vacuum and thrived. A new economy emerges. With the breakdown of feudalism came the birth of an urban economy, based not on tribute and birthright, but on capital and enterprise. Merchants, artisans, and bankers expanded their networks. Risk and reward became the new logic. In Florence, the Medici family rose to power not through conquest, but through credit. Their banks stretched across Europe, from Rome to London, and their influence reached popes and kings. But they also funded painters, philosophers, and architects, giving rise to the Renaissance. In Germany, the Fugger family followed a similar path. Once humble weavers in Augsburg, they grew into one of the most powerful banking dynasties of the early modern world. Jakob Fugger, known as the Rich, helped finance emperors and shaped European politics from his counting house. This was early capitalism in its raw form: investment, risk, credit. Even double-entry bookkeeping was invented during this era, giving merchants the tools to track complex operations and plan long-term growth. But money alone didn't make these cities revolutionary. It was how they handled power. In contrast to feudal courts, where a noble's word was law, cities built legal institutions to serve their citizens. Contracts were enforced by notaries. Disputes were judged by magistrates. Laws were published and debated in councils. In Florence, political power rotated every 2 months among elected guild representatives, ensuring no family could dominate for long. In Venice, elaborate electoral processes made it nearly impossible for a single faction to seize control. Even in smaller cities like Regensburg or Basel, burghers debated taxes, passed local laws, and managed defenses. This was governance by discussion, not decree. And when emperors tried to restore control, the cities resisted in one of the most dramatic confrontations of the age. The Lombard League, a coalition of northern Italian cities, faced off against Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. At Legnano in 1176, their citizen militias defeated the imperial army. The victory proved that power no longer flowed only from crowns, but could also rise from the cobblestones. Time, technology, and transformation. These cities didn't just rewrite laws, they reshaped time itself. In monasteries, hours were marked by the rhythm of prayer. But in cities, merchants needed precision. The mechanical clock, first developed in the 14th century Germany, turned time into a commodity. Clock towers rose above the skyline, their hands marking labor, trade, and productivity. And then came Gutenberg's printing press in Mainz. Books that once took months to copy by hand could now be printed by the hundreds. Legal codes, scientific texts, and religious tracts spread rapidly. Literacy surged. Ideas began to flow between cities, faster than kings or bishops could stop them. The cities of Germany and northern Italy had become laboratories for the future. Here were the seeds of democracy, the roots of capitalism, the architecture of modern law. Here were people who refused to accept the place into which they were born, and who built something greater through risk, ingenuity, and resolve. Today, when we talk about civic rights, market economies, or democratic institutions, we're standing on the shoulders of these city dwellers. The great revolutions of history, French, American, industrial, may have come later, but their foundation was laid much earlier, in the cobbled streets of medieval cities, not in the courts of kings or the halls of popes, but in the heart of the free city,